it was obviously a big issue. It trended on Twitter. The defence made the case that this would need to be addressed somehow by the court.
Yeah, and listen, I think the whole thing around Rory Best was a bit of a distraction from the important work that was happening in the courtroom. The public gallery was open. Rory Best was entitled to be there as a citizen of Northern Ireland. But aside from that, I understand why there was such a furore over it. You mentioned that hashtag campaign. My criticism, I suppose, criticism is maybe a strong word, but I thought if he had been, and I've no reason to think that he wasn't, but if he had been directed to be there by senior counsel, I don't know why that wasn't explained sooner than it was. It actually took some legal argument on behalf of Stuart Olding. Frank O'Donoghue got up and told the judge, in the absence of the jury, that it was in fact him that had instructed Rory Best to be there.
When you say instructed, right, like we can have a conversation here and I can instruct Owen to give me the cup of coffee, but like he doesn't have to do it. He's got free will. So like the Stuart Olding's barrister instructing Rory Best to do something has no power of compulsion. He's not an officer of the court. He's not a policeman.
No, and I think it would be unfair to suggest that he was compelling him to be there. Maybe advising would probably be a better word to use.
Was the message to the jury that he was advised to be there, or was that he was instructed to be there?
He was directed. I think was the
so
exact
there's
word that was used.
You know, I mean, they're lawyers and they're using these words like very carefully. We'll craft this word, but it seemed that the jury was like, oh, you can tell somebody to come here. That's like that they were. I'm not saying they were misled, but certainly I'm not entirely convinced that it was explained to them in a way that was straightforward.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And he did go to great length speaking about the backlash about Rory Best's attendance. And the point, and I suppose what angered him so much, was that Rory Best was only ever mentioned as a probable character witness. So was Ruan Pienaar, so was Leah McCourt, an MMA fighter that's quite close to Paddy Jackson. She lives up in Northern Ireland. Neither of those gave evidence either. And the concern that Frank O'Donoghue was making, and the reason he wanted to clear the air, I suppose, in some way with the jury, was that he was worried that what happened with Rory Best and the backlash that his attendance received on social media and elsewhere was that it would dissuade character witnesses from coming forward. We don't know why Rory Best decided not to give evidence in the end. It was never confirmed that he would give evidence. None of the character witnesses were confirmed. The jurors were simply told at the outset that they may hear from the likes of Rory Best and Ruan Pienaar and so on. So we will never know if other character witnesses were dissuaded.
That's interesting. So I didn't realise that. So at the start, when the case is being laid out, the defence case lists out the people who they might at some point offer as character witnesses. And it's after that Rory Best appears in court, and it's after that the legal argument happens, where it's decided that the jury are then told that he was directed to be there. That's a sequence of events.
Yeah, so there are big differences between covering cases in Dublin and covering cases in Belfast, and it was a learning curve for me personally. I'd never covered a case in Northern Ireland before, and quite a baptism of fire given the high profile of this case and the level of interest in it. At the beginning of the trial, and this would also happen in Dublin, potential jurors, this is before they're sworn in, the jury panel will be told a list of witnesses, police officers, anybody that gave evidence during the trial. The jury would have been given their name initially, and they would have been advised not to sit on the jury if they knew any of those. That makes sense. If they knew the lead investigator, for example, it wouldn't be right for them to sit on a jury because they could potentially be influenced by it. Brendan Kelly then took to his feet after the prosecution had listed the 30-odd witnesses that they planned to call, and he told the jury panel that they may, and that word proved to be crucial, that they may hear from the likes of Rory Best, from Ruan Pienaar, from Leah McCourt. Others were mentioned, others did give evidence, most didn't. So it's not that unusual, and then jurors would have indicated if they knew any of those people, and they obviously wouldn't have sat on the jury. So it's not unusual that that information would be relayed to them. The legal argument then would have obviously taken place in their absence. But when Rory Best and Ruan Pienaar's names were first mentioned, it would have been, I suppose, technically at a pre-trial stage, which we cannot report on.
Right.
So we had a question ourselves in the press box. Can we now say at the very outset that Rory Best may give evidence? And the general consensus was no, that there could be a difficulty, that we could potentially be held in contempt. So there was no court order put in place, but the media decided that it was probably best not to mention the fact that those we mentioned. Rory Best then, by attending that day, well, that kind of secured his own fate, that
Yeah.
people then knew that he was due to be called.
And